Hey there, a couple quick housekeeping notes before we get to the IU-Louisiana Tech post-game show. As you know, normally we do an episode of Assembly Call Radio every Thursday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanksgiving week is always a little bit tricky because it always falls on a Thursday, obviously. So sometimes we try and do a show on a Wednesday. Sometimes we try and pick it up on Friday. This week, the scheduling didn't really work out, so we're just taking the week off from Assembly Call Radio this week. So no show Thursday night. The next episode of the Assembly Call will be on Saturday after the South Dakota State game. We will have a post-game show for that. Remember that game is on BTN Plus. So, I know a lot of you, like me, you canceled your BTN Plus subscription. You're going to have to get it back up again, at least for this game, and then we'll have the post-game show for you right afterwards, as always, at assemblycall.com. But barring any type of schedule change, that is the last BTN Plus game for the season. So, you could also go get tickets to that game, over Thanksgiving holiday, a sub-200 opponent. Can't imagine that, the place is going to be packed or that tickets are going to cost a lot. And if you do want to go get tickets, go to SeatGeek because, SeatGeek has really revolutionized the way that tickets are browsed and the way that they're purchased online. They've got this really cool and really useful, useful obviously is better than cool, but it's a color-coded system, so you can actually see what kind of a deal you're getting on a ticket. And I found this really valuable. Just this past week, I bought my wife and I tickets to go see Hamilton. Hamilton's coming to Dallas-Fort Worth in June. And I wanted to go buy tickets, but it was at the Bass Performance Hall, which I've only been to once, but I don't really remember the seats and all, that kind of stuff. And so I wasn't really sure, okay, what are the good values here? I just don't have a lot of experience with the venue. Well, having that color-coded system to where I could see, okay, the green dots are the good deals, the red dots, those tickets are overpriced, that really helped me save some money on tickets that were pretty expensive. So, SeatGeek really helps you out there. Plus, every purchase is fully guaranteed, so that's obviously helpful. And they just have a big selection. I mean, you want to go to a musical, you want to go to a sporting event, you need tickets to the IU-Purdue game. They have those tickets there. So, whatever you need, SeatGeek is the place to go. It's a great experience. You're going to get good value. And that's why I use it. That's why I have it on my phone. That's why I feel comfortable recommending it to you. And SeatGeek will give you $10 off your first purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. So download the SeatGeek app today. Use the promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. All right, now let's get to it. The IU-Louisiana Tech postgame show. I am not on this postgame show. Monday night was my anniversary, my 4-year anniversary, and so I was spending it with my wife and daughter. But Coach and Andy have it. They watched every minute. They're here to break it down. So here it is, the IU-Louisiana Tech postgame show.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. Today, your Indiana Hoosiers defeated Louisiana Tech 88-75 after a great first 12 minutes of action that saw the Hoosiers jump out to a 39-16 lead in a dominating defensive effort and a dominating offensive effort, especially in transition offense. The Hoosiers looked to be maybe on their way to a somewhat easy victory, but that was not going to be the case. Louisiana Tech stayed in there, and Indiana led up at about the 8-minute mark of the first half, took a 52-36 point lead into the half. And again, everyone was wondering what kind of second half we were going to have. Well, the second half was not quite as enjoyable as the first 12 minutes. At one point in the first 8 minutes, I think Indiana had 9 turnovers, made some questionable decisions on offense, which led to a much tighter game than what the game should have been. And the final 88-75 leaves a lot of us wondering what happened in the second half, and I'm sure we'll hear from Coach Miller a little bit about that. I'm your host, Brian Tonsoni. I'm here with Andy Bottoms, and we will break it all down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. And let's start this show the way we start every show, and that is with our banner moment. Our banner moment tonight, for me, started out when the ball was tipped off. I thought the energy in the building brought by the Indiana Hoosiers defensively really set the tone for that 39-16 outburst in the first 12 minutes. That was something that wasn't there in the last game against Princeton, which led to Indiana having to make some big-time adjustments in the second half and pulling that game out. I was really impressed with the stance, the active hands, the closeouts. Not every possession was defended well, but it did set the tone. And then on the other end, Indiana went out and pushed out the lead quite easily on the break. So I thought the approach that Indiana brought to the game is my banner moment. And now we'll talk here about making that a little more consistently. So our banner moment tonight, as always, is brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, which was founded by an IU grad and remains based in Indianapolis. If you haven't been paying attention to what's been going on over at Home Field Apparel, you really need to go to their website, homefieldapparel.com, as soon as you can to check it out. Home Field still has the incredible, comfortable Bison Logan hoodie, which is made out of their soft tri-blend material. In addition to the Bison hoodie and the IU Basketball Champions t-shirt and the vintage sneakers design, Home Field has also been releasing an IU football-inspired design each week during the football season. Wait until you see what they have planned for the Purdue game, and I believe it just came out earlier today. Check out all of their unique vintage designs that you simply cannot find anywhere else, and certainly not on material this comfortable. Here's one final note that you need to know before you order. Because you're a member of the Assembly Call audience, you get a massive discount when you order at homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code Assembly20 at checkout to get 20% off your entire order. That's Assembly20 for 20% off your order. Go to homefieldapparel.com today and get the most unique and comfortable IU apparel anywhere. Okay, now it's time to move the ball and find the open man and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. It's a two-man show today. Jared's off and Ryan is traveling the world like Ethan Happ. And so we have Andy with us today, a two-man crew. What is your bottoms line on this effort from the Indiana Hoosiers?
Well, for potentially the first time ever, I'd like to quote Charles Dickens. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, because I truly thought that the first 12 minutes of the game were about as good as IU has played all season, as you mentioned in your opening. I'm like calling my younger daughter over. We worked on defense at her basketball practice tonight. I'm like calling her over, like, look at what this guy's doing here and whatever. And then luckily she went to bed before the rest of the game was played, because there's a lot left to be desired at that point. But, like you, I really liked how the team came out at the beginning of the game. I thought they were really focused and was impressed by that. The offense was crisp. The defense, the rotations were good. Everything looked great. And then for about a 4-minute stretch there between the under 8 and the under 4-minute timeout, things got a little bit sloppy on both ends. They started to relax a little bit defensively, gave up some open shots, and then they stemmed the tide toward the end of the first half. They played a lineup that had Trayce as the 5, kind of got themselves out of some of the issues that they'd been having defensively. And so you kind of felt like they'd weathered the storm at that point. Beginning of the second half was really just poor basketball from both teams. And I think there were multiple opportunities for Louisiana Tech to take advantage. And some of that I credit to the IU defense to be able to force turnovers as well. But some of those were unforced in the same way the IU ones were. Just angles weren't there to make the passes that IU was trying to make. So I think from a coaching standpoint, you probably go away from this one feeling okay in the sense that you won the game. You had some really good moments, but there, for what seemed like maybe there wouldn't be as many teaching moments in the game, that certainly rectified itself from a coaching standpoint over the second half. And while the game never really got close enough, I think, to make anybody nervous, they got to 10 at one point. I think it got to 9, maybe in the final 2 minutes there after a turnover. Never really felt in doubt, but definitely a lot of missed opportunities from IU to put the game away against a team that I think was better than what they showed in the first half in Louisiana Tech, who would challenge for the Conference USA title. So, yeah, I mean, definitely a lot to break down. It was funny. You sit and you start to kind of prepare in your mind a little bit for what we're going to talk about on the show. And after the first little while, I was like, man, this is fantastic. And then you watch the rest, and I'm trying not to jam a pen in my eye, trying to get through the rest of it. But, overall, IU took care of business, played some of their best basketball over the course of the game. If you want to look at the positives, if you want to look at the negatives, then just look at the second half.
Yeah, I think this was ultimately a game where we did a lot of good things, but when the play got sloppy, that's when you need a veteran point guard like Rob Finney, and his injury tonight only hurt us in a way that we couldn't get settled down when things were starting to go south there at the start of the second half. Justin had 2 turnovers. Al had 2 turnovers right away before the first media timeout, and I think there was another one. Like that was not the way to come out after a pretty solid first half. Up 16. The game of basketball, Andy, is a game of runs, and as fans, we love it when our team runs out to a 23-point lead. But water finds its level. That's going to come back into play. The shooting percentages were high for Indiana, so those things are going to level out throughout the course of the game. And so, at 16 points, you felt okay. This was a pretty good half overall. Maybe a little sloppy defensively at the end, but 52 points. The second half just was a struggle offensively from turnovers, bad decisions on shots, and that needs to be fixed in order to play some of the competition that we have coming up. But this was a top 100 team, and this was a team that went into Creighton and only lost by 10, and Creighton's thought to be a really good Big East team. So I think overall, again, it's better to win and to win by double digits against a top 100 team, your first top 100 team on the schedule, and feel like you need to learn from it, I guess, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think you bring up Rob being out. I listened to a little bit of the pregame interview with Archie on my way home this evening, and he talked about Rob dealing with a myriad of injuries, I think is how he phrased it. I know Sean Morris on the broadcast brought up that he did kind of get hit in the head in the other game. So I think it's probably reasonable for everybody to probably jump to the conclusion that maybe they're looking for that. But Archie didn't mention that. Not that I necessarily think that he would. It just seemed like he was dealing with a lot. But it is, we talked about this leading into the game where Louisiana Tech, very perimeter oriented, not a lot of size. It was going to be a challenge for IU regardless. Certainly becomes more of a challenge when you really only have 3 true backcourt players available for the game. And I do think they needed to find somebody to settle them down. And Al did a good job of that in the first half. I thought he really struggled with his passing in the second half. And that was really the thing. Most of the turnovers were just poor passes, trying to, fit the ball into a space that wasn't there, a second late on making the pass. Most all of the ones in the first half or in the early part of the second half felt like that variety to me. And I think that is where you miss a truer point guard. Armand had some good moments, drew 3 charges, but also struggled taking care of the ball at times, and allowed a veteran team to get him a little bit sped up and not getting the ball where they needed to, as they did in the first half. And IU did get Louisiana Tech into foul trouble, which eventually helped. But I definitely felt that Rob's absence was felt most during that opening stretch of that second half when IU really started to struggle. And like I said before, luckily the defense forced enough turnovers where it didn't really come back to bite him as much. But that seemed to me to be the part where you felt like you really needed some kind of steadying influence out there.
So in a game where Indiana wins by 13, 4 scorers in double figures, Trayce Jackson-Davis, 21 points and 11 rebounds, Durham with 18 points, Green with 16 points, 15 of which I believe were in the first half, and Joey Brunk, 12. And so we need to remember that that's pretty good offensive output for your Indiana Hoosiers. We will focus and talk here a little bit later about the number of turnovers were way too many, but don't lose sight of the fact that Indiana is putting multiple guys in double figures, and that depth it does wear teams out. And Indiana played poorly on offense in the second half, but Louisiana Tech was worn out trying to guard the size and the length of Indiana and was not able to take advantage of it. Now, will that play against a Florida State when you have a long stretch? I'm not sure it does, and that needs to be cleaned up here in the next week before the December 3rd game. But there's some hidden things within the box score, too, of the pace and the physicality and getting players in foul trouble and getting to the double bonus at 11-10 in the second half that really helped Indiana play through a tough stretch of offense. And so I would encourage fans to, yes, we are going to point out all of those deficiencies, because the second half just left you wanting more and more and more after a great first half. But there was a lot of solid play. And even behind the struggling second half, Indiana never, I think it got under 10 once very late. So I'm going to keep looking at this as somewhat of a positive with a lot of film session coming forward.
Yeah, I think you look from an offensive standpoint, I believe they finished the game, at least the way that I had charted it, at like 1.07 points per possession, which is not great. But when you consider just how bad the second half was, it was well under a point per possession in the second half. While at times in the first half, I think it was maybe at the might have been the under 12 timeout. It was like 1.8 something like that, which was just incredible. So it was, I think it's, if it was reversed and they played as bad at the beginning as they did in the second half, and things turned and played so well as well late in the game as they did at the beginning, it would probably be an interesting contrast in post-game shows, where I think the recency bias of watching how poorly they played makes us want to be pretty down on what happened, and I think there's reason to be concerned about part of that. But when the game was really in doubt at the beginning, IU came out and jumped on them, and I think that's something that we really had not seen a whole lot from this team over the course of the season so far. It felt like they'd played most of their best basketball coming out of the locker room to start the second half. So this was the, bizarro Indiana, or whatever you want to call it, where they really came out and played well. But I thought Trayce, we mentioned wanting, Rob as a steadying influence. I thought Trayce was the steadying influence tonight, always provided somebody that they could go inside to. Played well, getting to the line again, 11 of 13 from the line, ended up with a double-double. He was, on a night when he didn't have the point guard as the security blanket, he was the security blanket tonight, and another really strong performance from him. Got a couple really good buckets, just, quick spin move to the baseline where he made a shot and got fouled. Good offensive rebounds at times to extend possessions, and just continues to be impressive with all the things that he can do. So if there was one guy who was a steadying influence, it was him tonight for me.
I think he did a great job rebounding the basketball. I love the way he goes after the rebounds. A lot of them, most of them are two-hand rebounds just to go rip them down, and that quick explosion off the ground. And his post moves keep getting better and better and better. He catches the ball, he goes quick, and I think a couple times he might have been a little tired, missed some shots that we now expect him to make. And I think he only missed one free throw. I have too many things open for hosting the show, so I don't have the box score.
He was 11 of 13.
Okay, 11 for 13 from a post player. That does settle you down when things are going tough. You can't always play perfect. You need someone to settle you down, and it's nice that the post player did it. We do need a guard to play that role as well.
Yeah, he also nearly killed a guy when he tried to dunk on somebody at the end of the game, which was impressive if he had been able to pull it off.
Yeah, and you just, with our track record, you're like, okay, I appreciate that and I like it, but come away unscathed, please, because we don't want to talk about that anymore.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime anybody on IU goes down, there's a audible sigh of relief whenever they get back up after the fact.
What else stood out to you, Andy, that on the positive side, before after our break here, we start talking about maybe some of the things that they struggled with tonight?
I thought in the first half, Devonte and Al were both fantastic. They led the team in scoring. They both struggled in the second half, so we'll get into that, I'm sure. But if first half, Al had 12, Devonte had 15. And they both just played really confidently but smart. Al did have a couple turnovers in the first half, I believe. One of those, I'm not sure I would pin on him, that somebody mishandled the pass. But I thought those guys played within themselves in a way that in the second half they seemed to get away from, but really shot the ball confidently. That's the thing that really continues to stand out with Al, is just how confident he is, and how they were able to get easy buckets by really pushing the ball. I think the first 6-8 points were all just IU ramming it down Louisiana Tech's throat, getting the ball down the court fast, really attacking the basket. Al did that really well to start the game. And so, those two really set the tone in the first half. And set maybe a bar that they would not be able to attain in the second half. But that was really the other thing that stood out to me. And it feels like almost a different game when you think back to those first 12 minutes or so. But I thought they moved well without the ball, repositioned themselves to be able to get open threes and knocked them down, which, as everyone knows, is something that this team has struggled to do. Certainly did not shoot the ball as well in the second half. 0 of 6 from 3-point range in total for the team, not just those guys, and even only 32% from the floor in total. But I thought the first half they really got IU off to a good start by being aggressive, by being smart, and really by finding ways to get themselves open off the ball for good looks and taking advantage of those once they got them.
Both those guards did a great job, I think, getting the game to where it was at 16 points at halftime. And then it always looks bad when you turn the ball over and the decisions are somewhat lackadaisical. They weren't really aggressive mistakes, and that is on Al and that is on Devonte. But again, the things that you mentioned, the shooting, I saw Devonte do a nice job of tagging a guy. Race Thompson lost a guy on the wing or had lost a step, and Devonte was there, and I think either caused a travel or a deflection that turned into an Indiana fast break. And I thought there were a lot of those moments, but those two guys I thought really sparked Indiana and got off to a good start. And then their turnovers, we still have that memory of bad Devonte, good Devonte, and when he makes some mistakes, we all jump to the conclusion that it's going to be a rash of bad Devonte. But if we charted tonight's game, I imagine it would probably be a better Devonte than an overall bad performance. And it's always good to get that on film and remind him what he needs to do. But Durham's production has just been fantastic, I think, all year. 18 points. The turnovers way too many, but you do need that production from the guards. So coming up, we will continue our breakdown of Indiana's loss. I'm reading the script. Indiana's victory over Louisiana Tech. I will point out today's meaningful moment you might have missed, and then we will go inside the numbers and highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. You're listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Brian Tonsoni here with Andy Bottoms, and we're breaking down Indiana's victory tonight against Louisiana Tech. I read the right part of the script there as Jared prepares these for us. And it's time for today's meaningful moment that you might have missed. I have a few, and Andy, if you have some, we'll jump right in. I'm going to start off with two guys I talked about on the halftime show. The stats offensively and the box score might not have been there, and I don't know how much of an impact they had overall on the game. But in the first half, when Jerome Hunter and Damezi Anderson both got their chance on the floor, I thought we saw a much better defensive effort stance with those two in the first half. Damezi didn't get a lot of run in the second half, but in the Princeton game, both of those guys got limited minutes because they weren't locked in defensively. And the reason that's meaningful to me that a lot of people might have missed is because that's taking the transfer from one game and the lessons that Coach Miller had from that game and the practices since and put it into play. And I thought for the most part, those guys did what they had to do defensively. Damezi hit a few shots at a key moment to keep that first half moving. And those are the kinds of things that I like to see as a coach. Whatever your minutes, whatever your role, be ready to perform at a high level. And I thought those guys, when their number was called, played solid defense.
Yeah, I thought they did a decent job. That stretch toward the end of the first half that I mentioned where they moved Trayce to the 5, IU had really been struggling with some of the things they were trying to do with ball screens. I know that's become a kind of beating a dead horse at this point with the way that Brunk extends on those. Deron had trouble moving quickly enough to be able to get back. And so Archie went to that lineup toward the end of the first half that was Trayce at the 5, Justin and Jerome, I believe, at the other 2 forward spots. And then I think it was either Allen, Devonte, or Allen and Armand in the backcourt. And I thought that helped. They gave up 1 contested 3 that was made, I think, over the last 3 minutes of that half. I thought that lineup functioned pretty well. You continue to see Jerome get a little bit more comfortable with what he's doing defensively, knock down a few free throws. Damezi, really the only moment that I really, remember that was a negative for him. He took a quick 3 that led to a run out for the other team, and he tried to get back and block the shot. But I thought overall, those guys gave minutes. Those were 2 guys that Archie singled out on the pregame show, and even the announcers on the broadcast mentioned it, that he viewed, I think, in some ways, Rob's absence as an opportunity for those guys to step up, and just talked about, they need for them to be able to step in and make plays and absorb some of those minutes. So they did that in the first half. I think Jerome played 4 minutes in the second half. Damezi didn't play at all, but I thought they did contribute in the first half to the strong run that IU had.
Yeah, and that's good to see, because depth is important, and it's also important for guys to know they don't have to fill up a box score to have meaningful moments towards a victory. The other thing, I'm going to piggyback on something that you said about Trayce Jackson-Davis being a calming influence. The number of times after timeouts they went inside by design, and you have to give credit to Coach Miller. I have it 16-23 the second half, a sloppy start. I think Archie takes a timeout. They go into TJD. He scores. Then after, it's 56-40 after the first media timeout of the second half, and the first play after is another post feed into Trayce Jackson-Davis. I like seeing that from Coach Miller, that we're not playing well, we're kicking the ball around, let's go inside and get an easy shot at the basket, hopefully a score and maybe a foul. And then several times after a couple bad possessions, Indiana deliberately went inside. I know that's something that we all saw, but to see the production coming out of timeouts and coming out of bad series of play, to have someone like that you said calmed us down, but it was a team effort in getting him the post play. It's just really nice to have a guy like Trayce Jackson-Davis that you can go to in tough times.
Yeah, Sean Morris brought it up on the broadcast. I don't know, Jared mentioned this the other night, that maybe being a dad has made him seem better, but I found myself agreeing with him a lot. And there was one sequence where they ran the same play a couple times in a row, or a couple times within a few possessions of one another, and basically was just saying, hey, if they can't stop it, continue to go to them. And so IU does a pretty good job of screening inside to be able to give him just enough of an opening to be able to get there. And Louisiana Tech at times was really aggressive double teaming the post. That led to him being able to make that quick spin move to the baseline. That was a really good play. And you mentioned earlier that he continues to look more comfortable with his post moves. I feel like you just see a little bit more from him every game, where you see him learning, you see him making adjustments, even in game. And so that, real quick spin gave him a basket. And so I think they're just going to continue to find more and more ways to get him involved. But he produced, really made a number of baskets or free throws that didn't allow Louisiana Tech to get close enough for anybody to really sweat it out.
And my third meaningful moment that you might have missed is Justin Smith's play on defense. I know there was a lot of talk in a variety of places that I was getting messages from, that Justin was struggling, and he might have not scored a lot, but I thought his awareness on the weak side, several times he was contesting shots at the basket. One time he had a nice block and was wrongly called by those officials, those Bo Borowski wannabes. That was a sweet block on that side. He gets a back tap steal on a fast break late. He had several transition deflections where Louisiana Tech was trying to push the ball. And what I want to point out is, when things aren't going well offensively, that hurts a lot of times. Players will drop their heads and lose attention to detail on defense, and especially someone who's caught a lot of grief from a lot of us, that Justin's been up and down with his focus. To see Justin, what I thought was really locked in, they put him on the Archibald kid who scored over 20 points tonight, was really hot late. To see Justin stay locked in on the defensive end might have been something that a lot of people miss, because we as fans always look at the box score and the ball going in the basket. But I want to give kudos out to Justin Smith for staying locked in and making some really key plays defensively while the offensive game wasn't his sharpest tonight.
Yeah, we were texting a little bit about that during the game. I would agree with you that I felt like he stayed locked in defensively, continued to play hard on that end of the floor and make some positive contributions. He just struggled to really get himself going offensively. We've talked about that. I know Chad has brought that up about how important it feels like it is for him to see one go through the hoop pretty early in the game. That didn't really happen. His only basket, I think, was on a really nice offensive rebound and put back, and ended up 1 of 6 from the floor in 32 minutes. For him to take 6 shots in that scenario, I didn't really feel like he forced it. And so I think, again, that's something that you look at from him from a growth standpoint, where he was able to stay locked in a game when he wasn't getting a ton of shots, wasn't really involved a whole lot offensively, and continue to be able to make some plays. And we can say lots of things about plus minus over a one-game scenario. His was second best on the team. I think he did make contributions when he was out there. Ultimately, you want to see him do more. You don't like the 1 for 3 from the free throw line, and you've seen him the way that he's played for the most part in the season, give you those flashes and the more consistent flashes. But I thought in a game when there's plenty of games, I feel like this would be in the minority if you looked at games where he didn't have gaudy stats, where you'd say, I can point out a few plays where he really made key contributions and did some good things on the floor. I think that has been a rarity to this point in his career, where if you couldn't point at, tangible statistical things, you would struggle to point out ways that he impacted the game in a positive way. And I didn't feel that way tonight.
Yeah, I like that, because with this team and so much depth, there's going to be some high scores some nights, and maybe you get under 10 points the next night, but you need to have consistent play and in taking care of the ball. I did think he got sloppy with the ball, too, at the start of the second half, and I thought he settled for a couple shots. So I'm not totally pleased with anyone's game overall. Maybe Trayce Jackson-Davis, the one player who I thought played completely, but that is a big step, because if Indiana's going to play well, they're going to need to have Justin locked in. And the fact, Andy, that he only took 6 shots was really, really important, that he's not forcing it. And I think that's what Devonte has done well for the most part. When did Devonte make mistakes tonight? When he was trying to force it. And Justin didn't do that. Justin, I thought, was okay tonight, and I think that's something that a lot of people might have missed. So it's time now to go inside the numbers. Andy, I'm going to turn to you, and then I'm going to go peek at the box score real quick. What numbers stood out to you, either as a team or individual?
Well, I'm gonna shoehorn in a couple moments that I had jotted down as well.
Go ahead.
Actually, one of them happened 3 times. It was Armand Franklin taking a charge. I believe he took 3 over the course of the game, and again, wasn't a game that he was overly effective in, but he did a little bit of everything. 4 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. And I thought he gave the team some good minutes, did a good job getting back defensively, getting in position to draw those charges. And the other was, I think Archie only took 2 timeouts, but both of them were at times when IU was struggling, and much was made last year of not just in-game situations, but really the season, about how things kind of went too far before he was able to step in and try to stop things. I thought anytime he sensed that there was trouble tonight, he was pretty proactive in taking timeouts. In the first half, there was a sequence where they gave up a drive to the basket. Trayce didn't, kind of reached his hand in, but didn't really try to slide over. That led to an and one. Then they turned the ball over. Alawa made 3 from a guy that was wide open, took a timeout immediately. Took a timeout early in the second half before the media timeout, given all the turnovers. And so I think you see some, growth from him. I don't know, whatever you want to call that, but just being able to really want to step in and stop these things before they get too far out of line. Now, I'm not so sure. I thought the one in the first half worked a little bit better if you look at how you played in the immediate aftermath of that timeout than the second one. But I like seeing him make adjustments to the way that he did and fix things that maybe he didn't do as well as he would have wanted to a year ago. But from a statistical standpoint, it really
let me jump in and ask you a question coming off of that.
Okay.
Do you see his animation on the sideline is a lot more than what it was last year? And he's made a lot of those timeouts. Most of the second halves have been pretty good. Not today, but I think he was mad that the adjustments they talked about weren't being executed. What do you think about his level of intensity and animation this year? It seems so much different, so much like what we thought we would have. And then the question comes, why was he somewhat subdued during all of that last year? But I like it a lot. I'm biased, but I do like that animation quite a bit. What do you think's the difference, and why is he doing that? Because it seems to be working.
I don't know. I'm sure we could probably do a whole segment on a show trying to figure out the psychology of that. What I don't know. So I will say that potentially this year he's got more of the, I'm going to go to the quote unquote, his guys argument here, but he's got more guys that he, I don't know if he feels can handle that kind of coaching, or that want that kind of coaching, or that, are guys that he really has a better handle on their mindset and motivation and those kinds of things. That's obviously pure speculation on my part. And I think the other part of it is probably just, I'm not going to let the things happen that happened last year to really derail the season. And so if that means, steering away from what I did a year ago, I think that could have as much to do with it as anything. Just, I'm not going to make the same mistakes. And even if that means, in some cases, you might feel like you're overcompensating and swinging the pendulum too far the other way, I think he is probably introspective enough and self-aware enough to know that the way that he coached last year's team, despite the differences in personnel and personalities and all those things, is not a way that he's going to feel good losing. So it's one thing to say, hey, I'm going to lose doing it. If I'm going to lose doing it my way and not compromising on things like that. So I don't know. That'd be an interesting question if you had a truth serum to him to figure out what that really is or says. But I also think that you really aren't at a point yet you want to be at this point. But all the talk about like player-led teams and things like that, I don't think they're quite there yet, and I think they need some of that, especially in a game when Rob's not out there, to be the coach on the floor and all those cliche type things. But he's made it very clear that things that I feel like got let go last year are not going to get let go this year. And some of that speaks to the depth on the team. I mean, you had 10 guys playing the first half, and 9 of them, scored at least a point and grabbed at least one rebound. That's good depth. There's guys waiting to take your minutes if you're not going to do what he's asking you to do.
You bring up a great point about leadership, because your seniors, have been injured and not playing and sitting out some, and so has your point guard, who has been probably one of your better leaders. So the 3 guys that you kind of look for to really take that team over have been in and out of practice and in and out of games. And so maybe he's trying to deliver some of that to send the message. And so that's just been fun to watch, I think, from my vantage point. So what stats do you look at tonight that are good, or maybe a few that aren't so good?
Well, on the positive side, the getting to the free throw line continues to be a strength, and making free throws continues to be a strength for this team. I felt like they actually missed more in the second half than it seemed like. They did miss 8 in the second half. They're 20 of 28, but overall for the game, got to the line 38 times, made 28 of them for almost 74%. That continues to be a strength, and that really tonight, when the offense was struggling a lot in the second half, was a way to get easy points. The fact that they got Louisiana Tech in foul trouble, got themselves in the bonus and the double bonus pretty early, allowed them to, kind of coast along, I guess you could say, from an offensive standpoint after that. So that is a positive. The 3-point shooting in the second half was not, I think there was not really, I wouldn't even call it fool's gold in the first half, because the quality of the 3-point shots that IU got in the first half, when they were 6 out of 13, was so much better than the ones they got in the second half. So I don't think that's Louisiana Tech duped you into shooting threes and you made some, so it felt like you were better than you actually were. I just thought the quality of the shots there was far better than what we saw after that. And on the the negative side, it has to be the turnovers. We talk about wanting to have 12 for the course of the game. They had 12 in the second half, and just really came in bunches at the beginning of the second half. That was probably the most disappointing part. It's one thing to not get great shots. It's one thing to miss shots, and they did miss some shots around the basket that I think more often than not they're going to convert. But it was really just the turnovers and the somewhat careless nature, at the very least preventable nature, of so many of them that really stood out. Overall, defensively, allowed Louisiana Tech to shoot almost 50% from the floor. I thought at times really got themselves out of position by the way they hedged on ball screens. And you can see the one theme that has really, to me, been regardless of the opponent, that opponents are really, anytime Trayce and Joey, or not Trayce, Deron and Joey are on the floor, they're putting those guys in as many ball screens as they possibly can and trying to see what happens. And I think there are times when guys do a really good job of covering for each other and rotating and cover up some of those mistakes. And there's other times it really gets everybody in rotation. And Louisiana Tech did a good job of spreading the floor, given their size and what they want to do offensively, and made it really hard to get out to shooters. So that continues to be a potential problem area as you look forward. If they can't get some of those things straightened up, you may see more of those smaller lineups.
That ball screen coverage, I did a breakdown of it in the community, and it's just frustrating that Joey has some struggles. He goes out too far, and then he's a little slower to recover. I wonder if he can just close out a little, hedge a little bit less, or is it just his momentum gets going? I'm not sure what's going on, because Trayce Jackson-Davis, Justin Smith, those guys, when they hedge, they get the ball going backwards, which is the goal of a high hedge, and then they can recover. I thought there was some decent backside rotation at times, but when there's not, or you have to over-rotate to the man crashing at the basket, that leaves those corner threes open, and teams are going to hit that all year. So I think that needs to be fixed. And, boy, in 5 or 6 games, Joey especially just really runs out a little bit out of control and doesn't break down into a stance and where he's able to take a next first step back to recover. So that has been a frustrating aspect. And the turnovers, 18 overall is just not acceptable. I'm sure Archie is going to be livid, and they're going to be on the end line running for 18 turnovers, and I believe they had 12 of those in the second half. So that is not a way to handle a 16-point lead, and you're going to need to have some leads and protect some leads down the stretch. Hopefully we have a lot of them, especially on the road. You got to have ball toughness and be ball sure, and Indiana wasn't. So coming up on the assembly call, we're going to hand out our game balls and hit any other lingering storylines. Look ahead to Indiana's next opponents, and then it'll be time for next call. Stick with us.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. And while you're there, make sure to sign up for free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 7,000 of your fellow IU fans have subscribed. You can also text IU to 66866 to subscribe to the newsletter. That's IU to 66866. I'm Brian Tonsoni here with Andy Bottoms, and we're breaking down Indiana's victory over Louisiana Tech. It's now time for our game balls. So far, Al Durham has 1, Trayce Jackson-Davis has 3, and Devonte Green has 1. Andy, I'm going to let you go. I would wager good money. I know what you're going to pick. Who gets your game ball?
Yeah, this was we joked, and there were comments in the text chain for this one that this segment may need to be renamed in Trayce's honor, but I certainly think it was him tonight. As I said, he was the security blanket when things started to go awry and they needed a steadying influence in the second half. He really provided that. 21 points, 11 rebounds. Had a couple blocks and a steal as well. Just thought he played well really from start to finish. and continues to be really impressive. So it was a relatively easy one. The way Al and Devonte started, I think there was perhaps some early thought that they would be in the front runners for this game, but the way they took care of the ball in the second half and the way Trayce played tipped the scales in his favor.
Yeah, both those guards got off to really great starts, and Indiana was up quite a bit, and Trayce Jackson-Davis and Justin Smith only had 6 points together at one point. I think someone relayed to me in a text message, and you're like, okay, this is the game where Trayce isn't going to get his. It's going to be a guard-oriented game, and then all of a sudden he explodes up. And as we said a lot earlier, had to get him the ball in the post, had to settle the team down because they were not being efficient with the ball, and he ready. And the most impressive thing about Trayce, Andy, is free throw shooting, and that is just huge for a big guy who's tough to handle down low, to draw fouls one and then to make the other teams pay by shooting 11 of 13 from the free throw line. So Trayce Jackson gets my game ball. I think it's almost unanimous in the chat room. So Trayce Jackson-Davis gets a game ball number 4. So Indiana 6-0. Overall, would you say, Andy, that this game was one of their better games, or have they played better, or do you take into effect that they played Louisiana Tech a top 100 and there was going to be some ebbs and flows in this game? And they did cover the projected spread for those who are out there concerned with that by winning by 13.
I would, in some ways, I would say they played both their best stretches of basketball and their worst stretches of basketball over the course of this game. So I don't know where that leaves the game on balance. Makes it a little bit hard to answer. I definitely think the first 12 minutes, I think it would be hard to argue that they had played better during any stretch, certainly given the competition than what they came out. And I was looking through some of the quotes from the postgame. Al talked about that was really what they wanted to do, was come out and set the tone early. And Archie even said, the guards really played well in the first half, and added that as well as they played in the first half, they were just as bad in the second. Talked about the turnover as I believe the term dribble fest was used at some point. Dustin Dupiric had a quote from Archie: "The less this team dribbles, the better it's going to be." So I think that's definitely fair. So it's a little bit odd in that regard. So I guess if you want to look at the first half, I'd say it was their best game. And if you want to look at the second, arguably it was their worst. And so on balance, maybe that puts it somewhere in the middle. But I do think Louisiana Tech gave them a better test than what we've seen from the other games and what we're likely to see against South Dakota State over the weekend. So not not great, not terrible. Just kind of, overall, even though there were some pretty extremes one way or the other, I think the game itself ended up a little bit down the middle.
Yeah, I ultimately think this was a solid game because of the opponent. When you play teams that are 250 or above in Ken Pom, and when the net ranking comes out, those teams, it's supposed to be an easy win, and if you play well and win by 26, that's kind of some false hope. But this team won 20 games last year, had some players coming back, does a lot of nice things. It posed some problems matchup-wise because of how small they were and how quick they were. And overall, Indiana handled it. So I think that's overall a good thing. So we need to talk about a couple more. Race Thompson, Andy, your thoughts on Race's efforts this evening? He continues to impress me, and I actually would like to see him get even more minutes.
Yeah, I was surprised looking at the box score that he only ended up with 11. It was really largely 6 guys playing the bulk of the minutes tonight with the 5 starters, and Devonte. Race was the next with 11, and then Jerome Hunter added 4. So, for me, Race had 6 points, 2 rebounds in those 11 minutes, and I think he continues to be a solid defender. As you talk about guys being able to rotate and really understand that, he seems to have a good sense of that for the most part. So I would like to see more of him as well. I can see why, from a personnel standpoint, that was potentially a challenge tonight, but you did see him step out and make a 3 in the first half. That's something that has been talked about that he's been able to do. Who knows how big of a part of his arsenal that eventually becomes, but I thought he gave him some solid minutes as a reserve in the front court, and wouldn't have minded, seeing his minutes tick up a little bit closer to, 15, 16 something like that. But I think it's certainly hard to argue based on what we've seen thus far that he's, you can't argue against him being a core part of the rotation at this stage. And he's another guy, much like Trayce, that I feel like you're going to be able to watch and be able to see tangible improvement from game in and game out as he gets more experience at the college level.
And Race hit a three. It's really nice to see him be able. We've heard that he's been able to step out and hit that three, and he's really not sharing time, but he's backing up Justin. And Justin was needed tonight more defensively than offensively. And Justin's going to get more minutes. I think you're going to see Race's minutes drop because I think it's going to be TJD and Brunk and some of those others playing the five. And he's also backing up Trayce at the four. So when those guys are going well, then your minutes are going to be limited. But I really would like to see him get in there. And we're busting Joey on his ball screen coverage, but he did have double digits again, and he does play hard. There's several times when he is fighting for rebounds, keeping the ball alive. That's what he was brought in, team leadership and toughness. And regardless of sometimes what we find his faults to be defensively, those are some things that aren't in the box score as well. Do you agree?
Yeah, I thought he made some really nice plays in the middle of the zone. Louisiana Tech toward, I think it was the end of the first half. I don't feel like they played a lot of it in the second half, but they switched to his zone. He made a couple nice plays in the middle of that. Had a good turnaround jump shot as well, and had 4 assists. So tied for the team lead in assists on a night when IU only had 13. I think just 3 in the second half, I want to say. So that was another ugly one from a statistical perspective. But I think a smart player in one, like I said, you watch them go to that zone. He pretty much immediately got into there. They tried to run some high-low stuff with he and Trayce. I think that's one of the things that if IU is going to play 2 big guys, they've got to be needs to be a part of the arsenal, something they can get better at from a post-entry standpoint. But I thought he had some good moments overall, and this was. I think in the way that the game was a little bit of the good and a little bit of the bad for this team. I think it was a little bit of the good and a little bit of the bad for him. You certainly see based on what he did and how he produced, and from a basketball IQ standpoint, all those kinds of things, you see why Archie wants to keep playing him when you compare him to a guy like Race that we talk about. How do you get more minutes? And you see some things that he needs to get better at from a defensive perspective, which is really the bigger issue for him. But being able to hit a few, kind of mid-range jump shots is a positive for him. I think you see some of the offensive skill that you'd like to, and there needs to be some level of spacing. So if he's able to hit that 10, 12-footer in the lane, that becomes an important shot for IU offensively.
I thought he was a big part of the zone offense. As I mentioned into halftime, I thought the zone slowed IU down, not so much offensively, but hurt them defensively because they got out of their aggressiveness. But several times the ball got into Joey in that mid-post against the zone. He was able to turn and hit that mid-range jumper you're talking about. And there's also some good decisions passing high-low out of that. And I don't think it was Joey, but I think it was someone else. It might have been Duran when he was in. The ball went in, kicked out for a 3. That's good zone offense. Not sure how great Louisiana Tech's zone is, but it was good to see a concept, and Joey was a big part of that. So it's now time to give out a couple reminders. There's no Assembly Call Radio this week because of Thanksgiving. Enjoy your family, and there's a lot to be thankful for all of us. I know Andy and I are both thankful for good families and good friends and all of our listeners here on Assembly Call. Andy, we also have a game on Saturday, IU versus South Dakota State. The postgame show will be on Saturday. What can you tell us about South Dakota State?
Well, they're an interesting team because I think the temptation is to look and see what they were potentially a year ago. As you see them on the schedule, they had Mike Daum, who was a really good player there for a while, and I believe their best guard followed their coach to UNLV. If I'm remembering correctly, TJ Otzelberger was the coach, and I'm scrolling down here. Yeah, David Jenkins, I believe, is the guard who followed him there. So a lot of production to replace thus far. For South Dakota State, they're 5-3 right now. They do play one other game. They play Samford, not to be confused with Stanford. Between now and when the IU game is, they've lost to all the better teams they've played. They lost by 18 at USC, lost by 17 at Nebraska, and by just 7 at Arizona in their one of their last games. So a team that to me IU should again, be able to handle. You want to see them jump on them early and be able to sustain that effort for a bit longer than what we saw tonight. They don't force a ton of turnovers, so that's potentially a good thing on the heels of what we watched in the second half. Their defensive numbers from an efficiency standpoint are not very good. They're 241st right now as I look at it, so have done a decent job of limiting opposing shooters, but really in any of the other four factors haven't been particularly good, and they have not shot the three well, which is probably a sign they'll hit about 14 when they come into Assembly Hall on Saturday. And they have shot twos well, 56% on twos. So those are really, from a team standpoint, the stats to look at. IU favored at this point by 18, it looks like, on Ken Pom. And so, again, a game that IU should feel relatively comfortable in, and really the last one for IU to potentially have a little bit easier time of things before they get into the gauntlet that starts with that Florida State game in December. So you don't want to see IU look ahead. I think from IU standpoint, you're kind of playing against yourself a little bit in these scenarios. And on the heels of tonight's game, you want to see them start the game with the same ferocity that they started tonight's game, but can they sustain that a little bit more, take better care of the basketball, and kind of get back to some of the good habits that we saw early in this game, to build on those as you head into the tougher part of the schedule.
You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that because you're an Assembly Call listener, you get 20% off your entire order at homefieldapparel.com with the promo code Assembly20. So if you want a great deal on the most comfortable and unique IU apparel that you'll find anywhere, go to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code Assembly20 for 20% off your entire order. Okay, Andy, it's time for your last call. What impression of the Hoosiers is going to stick with you after tonight?
I feel like I need to go rewatch the first half before I go to bed. That'll leave me feeling a little bit better. I would encourage other people to do the same, or if you didn't watch the game, just shut it off after you get to the half. But maybe even the first 12 minutes, you can really save yourself some time. You looked at this game of the November games, and this was the one that it felt like you'd learn the most about this team because it would be the most challenging. And I think in some ways you can look and say that you did learn a little bit about what this team can be, maybe not at its peak, but playing close to its peak, even without Rob. And then in the second half, you see what this team might look like without him, and how the backcourt depth is a bit of a slippery slope at this point, given the number of games that IU has already missed and what you have there. So it was, kind of like we've said throughout, an uneven performance that if you want to focus in on the things that IU did well in the first part of the game, you come away with a really positive impression and feel good about what this team is going to look like going into a more difficult portion of the schedule. If you watch only the second half, you're probably scared to death and don't feel great about it at all. And I think the truth probably is somewhere in the middle for this team right now. But they are 6-0, and there's something to be said for that for sure. There are other teams in the Big Ten who can't say the same. And so I think that is a positive. The depth continues to be a positive, where you've got guys who you can turn to who are going to come in and contribute in what could be a small number of minutes, what could be double-digit minutes off the bench. And you've got a guy in Trayce that I think you're really able to build around. And if you can get good guard play like you did in the first half to sustain itself in the second half, and you've got a guy like Trayce playing really hard inside, it's hard not to get excited about how this team can grow over the course of the season. Archie made comments to that effect in the postgame, talking about how far they had to go defensively, but he does feel comfortable that the pieces are there to get better in that regard. And so it kind of just becomes a test for you of what you really want to look at and value, and how optimistic you are going forward, quite honestly, about this team. So I'll choose to take the positive side of things and focus in more on how they played in the first half, because I think that was really impressive. And despite how poorly they played offensively in the second half, I think defensively they did enough to never really let the game get close enough where you had to worry. I think there was one point where the crowd, you could tell, got a little bit nervous and started cheering a lot when IU had the ball. Like, can you just get a basket or two here to push this thing back up closer to 15 and then ride it out from there? So maybe there was, maybe one nervous moment from a fan perspective, at least in the arena, based on what I could judge. But I thought overall kept them at arm's length, and did a reasonable job of doing that. So a decent but uneven performance. Another solid one from Trayce. And the lingering thought you walk away with is you just need to see Rob get healthy, stay healthy. Archie talked about a rib and an abdominal injury that he's dealing with. So who knows whether that has anything to do with the shot to the head as well, as everybody's kind of brought up. So we'll see what happens there. You do see how important he is. You do see the guard depth. And I think at full strength, this team can really surprise some people. We just haven't seen the team at full strength. Zach Osterman had some crazy stat before the game last time the full complement of scholarship players had been available. So that's a little bit frightening and has become far too commonplace at this point. So I would love to see what this team can be like at full strength, because I think you saw enough with the guys that they had tonight to feel good about it. It just is a matter of when and if that's going to happen and for how long.
Yeah, I believe the first 12 minutes is what Indiana can play at its best, with the ball moving and with great defensive effort. And then they fell back into some of the things that they can't do. But the other thing is, how do you handle adversity? The whole second half was a struggle, and Indiana never really got underneath 10 points or were put in position to have a devastating loss on your home court with that big win. And we're seeing a lot of teams struggle to get wins and to get wins against different levels of competition across the spectrum of NCAA men's basketball. So good win for Indiana. Top 100 team on KenPom. We'll take it. We'll move on. We'll see the next game on Saturday. And
that's it. We're done. No more questions.
I guess Ryan needed to get some cereal. So that will do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall.com. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to longtime listener Bob Thompson, who produced much of the music you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Thursday night. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank everybody for coming out.